All right, so one by one, we're going to have to sort of knock these things out. They're not in any particular order, unfortunately. They actually are out of order. So we're going to go with the basics, the absolute basic things first, and then build on top of that. So that is, I want to create the order component first. So let's go ahead and jump into our terminal, and we'll do Python manage.py start app, and it's orders. So orders being the app that's going to handle the ordering related stuff. So the cart prepares the order is the actual portion of how we're going to handle it on the back end. Okay, so a couple things here. We are first going to need to actually create this order. So we'll say class order models.model. And the things we're going to need in this, we did kind of talk about right here. So I could say connecting the billing profile. So I'm probably going to need a field for billing profile. Okay. And we'll leave that empty for now. The next part is the shipping and or billing address or both. So those ones I'll probably have in here too. Shipping address and billing address. Now, of course, the billing address could be associated directly in that billing profile. Like we could have that association, but for any individual order, I might want to, not even think about that, right? So I might want these to be standalone as they are. That is, like I have billing addresses and I have shipping addresses or just addresses, and I can kind of pick and choose which addresses they are, and then it's not associated to something like our billing profile, which we intend to kind of put it in its own app itself, right? And then the next thing was the cart itself. So cart, and we can actually do this now. So I'm going to go ahead and do from carts.models, import cart, and we're just going to set the cart equal to models.foreign key, right? So we need that foreign key association. This means that they are now connected. So my one cart will be connected to my one order in this case, right? Okay, so I've got my cart, and the next portion would be the status that I want to work with. So the status of the order. So we'll just do models.char field, and we'll say max length equals to 120. And we'll just say default equals to maybe like created. Okay. And we also might want to have some choices for this, which we'll talk about in just a second. I also might want to have something like an order ID. So we'll do models.char field and also max length of 120. And with an order ID, what this essentially means is I want to assign a random string of characters or even numbers that is going to kind of represent this order ID for my end user. So if you remember back to how models are created, there's something called a primary key, which is also known as an ID, and it goes like 1, 2, 3, and so on. So these are in there by default. So there actually is an ID in there by default. But what we want to do is generate an order ID that's better for like just passing around and general usability. Something like, AB31 EFD, and then maybe some special characters, or just something like this, right? So this being our order ID, that means that, if you have support staff or something like that, you could just say, hey, what's your order ID? And they say this, instead of you say, oh, my order ID is 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, blah, blah, blah. Your IDs eventually start to get so big that you probably don't want to go with this logic, especially if 1, 2 things are off, or they give you one of the numbers wrong or whatever. There's just a lot of things that might go wrong with this versus giving letters and numbers and that finding out. So we're going to create it with that, keeping that in mind. And then we are going to do maybe the shipping total, like what is the shipping total and how would we calculate that? Granted, we are going to be actually using just a sort of a standard shipping total price, where the shipping address, this is where it could get a little bit more complicated by actually calculating what the shipping total would be based off of the address that they have, right? We're not going to cover that now, maybe in the future, but right now we're definitely not. That's starting to get way more advanced. And then finally, we're going to have an order total. So our cart does have a total, right? But it also did not include the shipping total in the cart. Most of the time you won't see that. I mean, unless you're something like Amazon where you're already logged in and you have all this stuff, yeah, you might actually see the shipping total in there, if there is even a shipping total. And the other side of it is like, well, what about products that aren't going to be shipped? So of course we are assuming that you are shipping products. This is an e-commerce project that assumes that you ship projects or products at this time. That's what we assume. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of, keep these commented out, but actually make our shipping total. And I can really just copy one of my models in here. And the reason I'm copying this, it has to do with more about the like formatting that I've already went with, like the max digits and the decimal places and all that. That's the only reason I'm copying that. So shipping total is going to be equal to that. And my default, I'm actually going to put it at, like something like $5.99. That's probably even a good estimate if you're in the United States to have, right? Like, unless you have big products, then maybe you're going to do something like $19.99, right? But you'll have a better idea of that if you were doing this, or if you're doing it for somebody else, they would have a better idea of like just sort of a standard shipping total before you get too complicated with the shipping addresses and calculating it there. I have this order total. I actually am just going to leave it in as also just total, and we'll paste that other total item here, and we're gonna leave it in as default being 0. Okay, so we've got a lot of stuff that is actually very, very similar to our cart, right? The one exception here is that shipping total and that order ID. So we actually need to generate those things. And then also the status of our order. So I'm going to make a tuple here, also called tuple, called order status choices. So this is going to give us some choices on what this value can be. So it's basically going to be created being 1. So just follow along with me here. I'll explain how this is working. So we'll say created. We'll probably say, paid, like finished paying, paid. We also might have like shipped, and maybe the last being refunded. And what are these tuples and what's going on here? So basically the choices, you have your database stored value on the left and then the display value on the right. That's really all it is. That way you can do something like choices equals to that, right? That's it. That's how you can actually make drop-down choices in like a Django model form or even in the admin. These things we will absolutely see if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. Okay, so we've got order status choices now. We have our order ID. We are going to have to create our order ID, right? So I'm actually going to leave this as blank equaling to true. And I'm also going to leave, well, actually, I don't want to leave the cart as blank. I want to make sure that that cart is required. But I will leave these other 4 items blank. Actually, I don't need this. These other 3 items blank for now because we just don't have them. Instead, I want to just kind of show you how we would generate this order and then handle it. So I'm going to do define the str method here if you're on Python 3, and it's Unicode if you're on Python 2. And then we're going to return self.order ID. Okay, so what we still need to do is we need to generate the order ID. And then we also need to generate the order total. So how are we going to do these things? Hopefully you have a general idea, and that is we're going to probably use signals. We're not going to do it quite yet. Instead, what I'm going to do is just kind of add this into our settings. So the orders app, now that we've created this model, I'm going to add it in here and bring it in as orders and then run our migration. So Python manage.py, make migrations, and then Python manage.py, migrate. And while we're here, I'm going to just go ahead and go to the admin and bring in that order. So we'll do from.models import order, and then admin.site.register order. Okay, So let's go ahead and look at the admin, make sure it's in there. We go there, we click on orders. I go to add order, and here we go. So we've got a blank order ID, makes sense. We've got the selection of carts. We also have a different status. Notice how they are all capitalized, whereas these on the right were all capitalized. So the stored value is what's going to be on the left, and then the display values on the right, and then we have the total. So not a whole lot going on here. So we still have a few more things that we need to do to actually pretend like this order is real. So stay with us.